Welcome to Advancing Our Church, a podcast about Catholic stewardship, leadership, and advancement. I'm Jim Friend, and before we get started, I just want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Changing Our World. If you're in charge of fundraising for a Catholic organization and you're looking to make a significant impact, Changing Our World can help. Their expert team provides customized services to help Catholic organizations radically connect with new and existing donors. So whether you're looking to start a new fundraising campaign or if you want to improve an existing one, Changing Our World can offer the guidance and support you need to achieve your fundraising goals. Just visit changingourworld.com today to learn more and check out the link to their website in the show notes of this episode. And now, let's get to work. Well, welcome everybody. Welcome back to Advancing Our Church. We have been gone for a minute, but it is great to be back with you. I have a wonderful special guest today, Mr. Will Murley, and I'd like to provide a little introduction. But first, welcome, Will. So glad to have you here on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Thanks for having me and extending an invitation. I'm grateful to be here today.
Excellent. Well, let me introduce you, Will. Will is a financial advisor who specializes in helping Catholic individuals and families to make a holistic financial plan. They give to charitable organizations and to help them invest accordingly to the USCCB guidelines. Will is originally from Central Florida, something we have in common. After college, he was a Catholic missionary and worked in ministry for 4 years. As a husband and father, Will enjoys spending time with his family, fishing, and deepening his relationship with the Lord through his Catholic faith. Again, welcome, Will. It was interesting. When you and I first met, we found we had so many interesting similarities in our backgrounds. We had both attended the same parish, actually, down in Central Florida, and just some of the places that you visited and have lived in. So I was glad to meet you at our Friday morning Bible study and with the men in the greater Philadelphia area. And it's just great to have you on the show, Will.
Yeah, Jim, it's great to be here. And it's almost eerie how many things we had in common with the parish where I went to youth group and had my conversion.
Yes.
So the Lord was the same one where you got married in Central Florida. It's not like it's this like a big parish, right? It's a small one.
No, it was.
And a couple hundred people could fit into it. Yeah.
Exactly. And actually, I don't know if I shared, that is the parish where my whole family converted to Catholicism back in the early 80s. So at that parish, and then later, years later, I wound up meeting my wife there as a young adult, and then we wound up getting married there. So a big shout out. Do you mind if I say the name of the parish?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. Big shout out to St. Augustine Parish in Castleberry, Florida, where Will and I have attended at different periods of history, but a parish that has a wonderful meaning for both of us. So, so Will, tell us what it's like being a missionary, and who did you primarily serve in that capacity?
Yeah, absolutely. I could definitely answer that. And first, just as you mentioned, Jim, I'm a financial advisor. Yep, just have a little disclaimer I have to read off here. So professionally, I'm a financial advisor with Equitable Advisors, LLC, a broker-dealer in FINRA and SIPC member firm. I'm also an investment advisor representative with Equitable Advisors, LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor and insurance agent with Equitable Network, LLC. It's important for me to point out that my talk here today, this is not intended and should not be relied upon as solicitation, recommendation, or offer of any insurance, investment, financial product, service, or advice, nor should any part of my presentation here today be relied upon as any form of financial advice. So there's a disclaimer. Hope you heard it and listened to it. And to answer your question about being a missionary. So when I was a missionary, so after college, a little bit, 2 years after college, I was a Catholic missionary with NET Ministries, National Evangelization Teams. And who I primarily served, or who we served, was, I'd say, mostly middle school and high school, but my team also did a lot with young adults as well. Most NET teams travel across the country. We were in Naples, Florida, which, if you ask me, is a great place to be stationed as a missionary,
I'd say,
considering the weather. And then what was it like? It was amazing. It was difficult. It was beautiful. It was grim at times. When you're in the trenches in ministry, you really get to see, it's hard to describe. You get to see the beauty of the Lord and the difficulty of the cross at the same time. And the enemy doesn't hold back as much whenever you're a missionary, but also you have more protection. So it's like this weird state of grace and struggle, all wrapped up.
Yeah, that sounds like a special time in your life.
Mhm,
And Naples, what a beautiful area down in Florida. Absolutely. That's a nice perk.
mhm.
But yeah, and I know you had an element of fundraising in your missionary, which is something that we talk a lot about on the show. How did you fundraise as a missionary? Did you have certain
Mhm.
strategies that your organization used?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm not sure how much you need to fundraise now at them, but years back when I was serving, the total ticket price, as it were, to fund a missionary was about 20 grand. And that was for 9 months of service. Missionaries raised about one third of that. Another third came from large donors who supported the organization. And then the last third came from retreat fees, things the parish might pay to have a net team there. And the strategy, they actually had a really good fundraising strategy. And it was centered around human connections and networking. I'm going to get these numbers a little off, but they said like 1% chance your fundraising letter gets you a donation, 20% chance your phone call, 60% chance you meet in person, give or take. You can follow sort of the strategy there, the numbers overall. So really, what I did is I did exactly what they told me to do. I contacted 50 people, called them, those who are close by. I sat down, for lunch, sent some letters to family I just wasn't close to. That was sort of a, I hope this works kind of deal. And I got a little bit from that. Um, but really, the in-person meetings, I think, yielded the best donations and also the best relationships. And I'm a true believer that whenever you are donating to a cause, especially a missionary, because it's a very personal, you know where your dollars are going, supporting them directly. I'm a firm believer that there is some sort of spiritual relationship insofar as prayer, shared mission, joint purpose. And I'm so grateful to those who supported me. I have a fun story. I'm not sure if we have time, but I do have
Yeah,
a fun
sure.
story about the biggest donor. Okay.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So I was a
We
missionary.
always want to hear about big donors, Will. Everybody who's
Oh, yeah.
fundraising, they always want to hear your big donor story. So please go
Yeah.
right ahead. Sorry.
This is big for me. So big for me. Tried
Okay.
to raise about 7 grand.
Yeah.
So as my first year of service was wrapping up, I knew I was going to be serving another year, this time on staff, but still had to fundraise about the same amount. And I was at a parish called St. Agnes in Naples, Florida. And during the psalm, I'm sitting in mass, and this elderly woman leans over me and says, they're singing, I think it was Jeremiah 29:11. It's like, I know the plans I have for you. I hope I got the verse right, but that was the verse. Like, I know the plans I have for you. It's good, not woe, paraphrasing there. And that Bible verse was actually on the front of my journal. And I just hold it up to her, showing her the front. And I say, I know. And like, not a snarky way, but just kind of like a silly, endearing way. And then she's like, good one. And it's kind of like this weird, funny, awkward
Yeah.
interaction during Mass. And so then we get chatting after Mass, and apparently she's a hyper wealthy individual. She had a family member from Lebanon who's either a saint or related to one. And the next thing I knew, like the next week, she's taking me to her country club in Naples. We're getting lunch. I'm having like red snapper and grouper. And she ended up donating to me over 2 years about $4,000 to $5,000. And it was such a blessing because I didn't know where to go for donors. And I was grateful to the Lord that He just provided this fun divine intervention that not only I met a cool person, but makes a fun story.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. I love it. I love it. Well, now you're
Mhm.
working in finance and business. Is there anything that you've learned in your career that would help people fundraise today?
Yeah, I would say a lot. And it's been very eye-opening being an entrepreneur in business in the world. And I really think, what would you say? The currency of business is reciprocity. I really see that and believe that. And then with what I do in financial planning, advising, building a book of business, servicing clients, I do a lot on LinkedIn. And so I get to make a lot of connections there, which is really good. And that's actually growing at an astounding rate. 20 new connections, followers a day. Doesn't seem to be stopping. So that's exciting.
Wow.
But what I found is, what would you say? When you connect with someone and you're helping them for business, that you have like even like a talk track, like, hey, what did you find most valuable about what we did today? And they might say, well, I really enjoyed the financial planning. I got to see everything in one visual, and I've just been needing some clarity with my situation. And that's like, great. I'm glad to hear that. A lot of people that we serve say the exact same thing. And then one of the great main ways I grow my business is through meeting new people, being introduced to great people who know other great people. It's a word of mouth organic business. Who are some people that you highly respect that could benefit from this sort of conversation? And just knowing the power of introductions and referrals in the business world is huge, whether it's unsolicited or a bit more, what would you say, walked through, like what I did. Mm-hmm. So I think in the fundraising world, there's a lot that people can learn about a sort of referral-based system of knowing how to approach that with donors. And I think it's probably even easier because, like, who are some Catholic families who really believe the church needs more support or needs some help? It's like, oh, my Uncle Bob, he's always talking about the tradition, that like ad orientem, like something passionate about the Mass. Like, well, that's great. I love to meet with him and chat with him. But I also want to respect the relationship. Could you connect with him first? I can touch base with you in a couple of weeks. So to kind of role play there, it's all introductions, networking, and word of mouth.
Yeah, I find that as well in the work that I do at St. John Vianney Center. We're often trying to engage our donors, our board members, even our friends in opening doors so that we can just have the opportunity to tell our story. People who love us, who have expressed that in some way either through their donation or their volunteerism, often want to help us. And they may not even have thought about it that way. They might not realize, oh yeah, well, if I love this place, I'll bet Uncle Joe, like you said, or one of my friends up the road who's also a Catholic and loves loves our faith and wants to be a part of helping our ministry for clergy and men and women religious. They might also want to help us in making an introduction. So it's great advice. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And just putting yourself out there, being a good person, taking the initiative and not expecting a thing in return. And also, I think deep down on an interior level, being okay with that. Like, I had someone who reached out to me on LinkedIn and they wanted to, they had this like parish magazine that they're doing. And, I listened to her story and in my heart and mind, it's like, okay, she's a good person. I agree with what she's doing. I don't need magazines, but I would love to help her out. So I gave her 5 referrals, people she could chat to that I know. And I have no expectation of anything coming back, but it's like with the line of work that I do in business and then you through development, you just do good to a lot of people and good things will come to you.
It does come back.
In a way you don't expect.
Absolutely. Yeah. Fundraising is definitely that way. Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about how you help Catholic families now.
Yeah. So what I do is holistic financial planning. It's a fancy way of saying it's big picture, right? So you can think of finance like a Venn diagram. A lot of things overlap. So the more coordinated you can be, the more strategic you can be. 2% efficiency here, 1% efficiency here helps everything work together, especially as prices just going up for almost everything. School, real estate, food, inflation's a real land shark biting through this country for sure. But how I help Catholic families in particular, I'd say it's twofold. The first fold is helping to frame the vision and what's really important. It's a cooperative process. In fact, I'd say it's more so they lead it, right? Like, what do they value? What do they want? And then I get to help them really see, like, it's family that we're working for. It's the church. We want to be generous. We want to not be controlled by our wealth. We want to use our wealth as a tool to love others and to be a blessing to others. So part of it's just the framing and the process that we do. And the second fold is actually tangible and practical. So what I'm going to say, of course, this is not financial advice because of my station as an advisor on a platform such as this. But, it may be something to consider insofar as like doing more research, talking with someone who's a professional, who's credentialized. But the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, in its document Socially Responsible Investing, outlines several criteria for investing responsibly. And so what we do, my team, so there's several Catholic and Christian advisors I partner with at my company. What we do is we have portfolios that do 3 things. The first is take out the bad, right? Companies that support, that are against certain life issues, slave labor in the supply chain, sometimes weapons of mass destruction, pornography, to name a few. How do you keep those out of your portfolio so that you're not an owner in what is bad? The next is actively emphasizing the good. So having mutual funds or investments that pick companies that have strong fundamentals, do well to their community, their employees like working there. And then the third category is, well, the companies, whatever is composing the mutual funds or the portfolio achieves the goal. Like you want growth. Well, this asset allocation is oriented towards growth. You want income in retirement. Well, this asset allocation is for that. And it's really fascinating, Jim, because whenever, like in the life of a Catholic, the life of virtue we're trying to lead, we're not just trying to avoid the bad, right? It's like, it's not just not sinning and then trying to get to heaven. It's right. We don't sin, we actively grow in virtue. And then there's the practical things that we do to achieve that. And then living in the world. So too with our finance, because I firmly believe that wealth and money is often the last secular holdout in someone's life. They start going to mass, maybe they kick the addictions, they're growing in humility or temperance, you name it. But then there's this whole unevangelized world of wealth that they are still participating in as if they weren't even Christian or Catholic. So avoiding the bad, growing in virtue and doing good, you apply that to your portfolio. And I'm firmly that I think good things happen. Not just like rate of return where I'm optimistic or confident, but that everything that you're doing is focused on something that is good.
Well, I would imagine it's such a helpful explanation. Will, I would imagine you probably encounter people where you're going through their portfolio and they may not even realize that some of these companies are in there, or they may not realize what some of these companies are about and that they do not adhere to Catholic social teaching, or they might have this piece that is not compliant with our faith. I would imagine you encounter that all the time.
Yeah, I've encountered that. And then I think a lot of people, there's several camps. One is subconsciously it bothers them, but they don't address it / they don't know where to go for solutions. Or there's this belief that if I do that, I can't achieve my investment objective.
Sure.
That's one group. And the other group is they have no idea. They never thought about it. But when you bring it up, then they start to think about, wow, I didn't know my money. Like I'm an owner in all these bad things. And it's a little hard. Like I am shifting my portfolio in order to live out this life of virtue. And it's hard. Sometimes for tax purposes, it takes some time to do it. Right. But my thought is, and perhaps the bishops will correct me, I don't think it's a sin per se to invest normally, but I think the more you grow in wealth, the more you should discern this and take it seriously. It's something to consider. And I can't say you should or shouldn't do as an advisor, but on a podcast. Yeah. But it's something to consider.
Well, I would say anyone with any, my advice, it's interesting you say this, because now I'm not going to claim to be an expert, but we just, in the diaconate program, we just finished a course on moral theology, right? And so, whether you have a large portfolio or a very small one, I would imagine, the sin is still the same. We can't say, well, I only have a couple of stocks here and there, it doesn't really matter, versus somebody who might have thousands of shares of stocks in something, and it might matter more, right? Well, we still are conscious of that sin, and we'll be held accountable for that. So I think it's something for all of us to take a look at in our planning. I would imagine you probably encounter a number of different kinds of obstacles in this process. What kind of obstacles do you encounter while you're helping these families?
In general, on like the Catholic values piece.
Well, just in general, what are some of the common obstacles that you see to financial planning for Catholic families, and how do you kind of overcome them?
Yeah, there's a range. I think there's the more standard. It's not necessarily a Catholic objection. Sure. It's like the do-it-yourselfers. And to be fair, there's a good chunk of people who are good do-it-yourselfers with investments. Now, the data doesn't support that in aggregate. Yeah. I'm not sure if I can quote certain articles here. You can message me on LinkedIn to learn more. But there's some literature to suggest that do-it-yourselfers overall hardly beat inflation if they do over 30 years. So that's one thing I've encountered, is there's a sense of possessiveness and attachment to the plan. And now maybe they should do it themselves, but other times I get the feeling that they're making that decision out of a sense of control and possessiveness, whether or not they are called to have an advisor help them. I don't know that. I just show up and see what I can do. I think on the Catholic values piece, sometimes there's this thought that like it's too like I don't believe in it financially, that it will do what I want it to do.
Yeah.
And we can look at the history, we can look at the different things that tend to point towards, optimism, but it's something that I can't overcome. Also, like I'm not a salesman. I just want to meet with people, educate, and if they want me to serve them, like I want to serve them as well. Another obstacle for families I've noticed is when there's a married couple and they make two separate islands out of their finances. And sometimes that makes sense, but I think in the spirit of the vocation of marriage becoming one flesh, it can be a source of division. You see this a lot when two professionals get married, so a doctor and a lawyer, and they both are wealthy enough to kind of self-fund their separate islands. But in the spirit of unity, I don't believe it's always a good idea to have that. And I have an example. So many years ago, I worked at a different company and I was in onboarding, so helping to bring on new clients. And there is this widow, who was around 60 years old. Her husband was about 65 when he died. And the husband had a dozen investment and bank accounts scattered across the financial world, different companies, different firms. Nothing was set up for an estate transfer to his wife. So she had been spending the past year and a half pretty much reliving her husband's death, because she had to call each place. Well, first find them where they were, call them, prove the death, re-register, transfer paperwork, which requires all these things like medallion, signature guarantee, which is, if you're in the industry, you probably just cringed when I said that. And that's something I bring up with clients. It's like, for the sake of your spouse, like it's appropriate to have a plan and consolidate. Whether or not you use me or any other advisor, like what's best for your family is to have that estate transfer plan, or else it's going to be a miserable year and a half, most likely for you.
Yeah, I would imagine so. It's interesting you mentioned the not selling people selling your services as much and wanting just to work with people. I find the same principle is really true with fundraisers as well. It's, I present our case for support at St. John Vianney Center to someone, and they may or may not be interested. That's okay. I'm not trying to sell them. I provide our mission. If you'd like to be a part of our mission, great. If it aligns with your values or your philanthropic interests, wonderful. But quite often we find that this is just not something I'm interested in doing, and that's okay. We all have, they may be more interested in Catholic education or Catholic social services or something else. There is kind of a universal aspect to what we do around healthcare and mental health, but it's not for everybody. So I tend to not push it on anybody, and I present it. Here's an opportunity. Would you like to talk more about it, partner with us? And I would imagine it's a little bit of the same with how you work with people when you're presenting your services.
Yeah, I want to educate, provide clear recommendations, and then it's up to them. Do they want to work with me? Do they want to self-implement? Like, I don't want to shoehorn my way into anyone's life. I want to work with people who need someone like me, and I want to work with people who I think I can benefit in a really good way.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you can't give any specific advice, but what are some of the general principles to planning that you try to instill with people?
That's a big question. Practically, you want to focus on having that safety net set up. So this is pretty common knowledge, like your emergency savings, risk management tools especially for married couples. The idea is, if an income earner passes away, are the dependents taken care of? If there's you need to buy a new car, that you're not hitting the credit card to do that. So getting that safety foundation, and I think practically, spiritually even, because money can be so distracting and wealth so distracting, that having these sort of the basic foundation of financial stability set up, that it allows you to think less about your wealth and to be prone to fear less, because you have this structure. And then I'd say the next tier is focusing on things like retirement and major purchase goals. So retirement often takes a long time for the magic to happen. Compound interest, regular disciplined investing over time. And also major purchase goals. You don't want to sacrifice too much of today to fund the future. Like, you do want to live today to some extent. And then after that, focusing on things like a child's education, which might seem a little backwards, but the truth is Social Security won't front you 20 grand for a new roof. but people will let your children borrow money for college. The price is going up, but still think of that airplane analogy. When the mask falls down, like put your mask on first, and then you can put it on the person next to you. Because if you don't, your retirement plan might become your children taking care of you. And that's not a bad thing per se, but the way the American system is set up, that has a big ripple effect. And I think throughout the process of growing in wealth, having a regular habit of charitable giving, and I would challenge everyone listening to wrestle with net 10% of their income. My wife and I do that. It can be a little hard to see that come out of everything that comes in, but we have so much joy from being able to support missionaries when they come to us and ask for money, right? You can give a 500 here, 1,000 there. It's a real blessing. But even if you don't have a lot of money, I think a regular habit of giving is so key, because just like the woman at the temple, and Jesus said, the one who put in the one coin, put in more than everyone else combined. When you can give from your need, you'll be better set up to give when you have abundance, because wealth just exaggerates your characteristics and your personality and your actions. It doesn't improve them. It just magnifies your actions.
It's really well said. I mean, it really is about the fact that we've all been blessed in different ways, and after some prayer and reflection, we have to decide, what is God calling us to do, and it is an act of faith, stewardship, and sometimes it's a leap of faith, especially when you're talking about 10% of everything that comes in the door. Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. Couldn't agree more. And I imagine that when you do that as a couple, and I know this is true for my wife and I, that as we make those decisions together to the organizations that are important to us as individuals, and also especially as a couple, it draws us closer not only to our faith but also to each other. But how can a financial planner help someone to charitably give? You've kind of already described that a little bit in your discussion around stewardship, but I've spoken with different financial planners over the years, and sometimes they're aware of tax breaks or even opportunities where it helps your dollar go a little bit further if you were to invest in certain things, whether there's tax benefits or tax credits or what have you. But how do you go about doing that to help people with their philanthropy?
Yeah, so there are several areas I can touch on today. The first is, on the basic level, cash flow analysis, how much is in the bank. For smaller donors, often that's just where it comes from, right? Just cash that they have. For more strategic methods for higher income, what would you say, higher net worth individuals, I'm going to throw out a few things. Of course, this is not advice. A lot of these things have, what would you say, for the term, like in the tax code, there's a lot of catches to them for certain small situations, especially when you start to get to ultra high net worth. So, of course, consult anyone or a consultant advisor or something for this. But one area is like if you have stock in a taxable brokerage account, an individual brokerage account, if it's appreciated a lot in value, so there's a lot of capital gains when you sell it, often under certain circumstances, you can gift that to the nonprofit, and neither you nor the nonprofit has those tax consequences under certain circumstances. Another one is in pre-tax accounts like traditional IRAs. A lot of retirees do not want to do their required minimum distributions, but they have to. And so one thing that they can do is create or do what's called a qualified charitable distribution. So if you have to get money out of your IRA, but you don't want to, but the government's saying doing it, there are certain limits and rules where you can potentially send that right to the nonprofit, and it's not taxed, that chunk of money that goes out. And then the third way is life insurance. So you can always just make a church the beneficiary of a death benefit for your life insurance policy. But there's several companies out there that what they will do is without affecting the premium, you can add a 5 or 10% bump to the death benefit for a charity. So let's say whether the primary beneficiary is your spouse or it is the nonprofit, if it's $1 million, let's say, sometimes 50,000 to 100,000 can be added to a nonprofit after you pass without affecting the premium. And that's a great way to give, especially to leave a legacy. And I think legacy is an overused term in my industry and an excuse to sell life insurance. And it shouldn't be. But to go against what I just said, you can leave a legacy by having that type of life insurance policy.
All good stuff. And in my career in fundraising, I've seen folks implement all of those, and they can have it can be surprising when you look at a life insurance policy or a distribution from your IRA or even appreciated stock, any of those things. Sometimes the donor can do a lot more than they realize that they could, and save themselves the tax implications of capital gains tax and that sort of thing. So, absolutely. Well, we're going to leave your contact information and your link to your LinkedIn profile if anybody would like to connect with you. But do you have any final thoughts for us today?
Yeah. Well, first, thanks for having me on, Jim. I really appreciate it. It's great. I was grateful to meet you and find that we have a weird amount of things in common. And
it is a weird amount of things. You're right.
Yeah. And excited to be able to network and grow in friendship with you over the months and years. And then as for final thoughts for people listening, if you are in the trenches fundraising, just know that the Lord has all the money in the world, right? And there's a great book called Searching for and Maintaining Peace by Father Jacques Philippe. It has nothing to do with finance per se, but he really makes a great point that the soul is like a surface of a lake. And whenever it's agitated and the waves are crashing and moving, the light doesn't reflect very well off the lake. But if the lake surface is calm and flat, then the light reflects well. So the idea that God's grace can come to you and then go out from you. So if you're fundraising, just know that it's the Lord. But the Lord has to do hard work. That doesn't give you an excuse not to work hard. But at the end of the day, it's like, Jesus, this is up to you to fundraise this. And then for families and individuals, whether you're wealthy or not, money and wealth is not supposed to be a dark cloud of stress over your family. The Lord has all the money in the world. He also has all your debt, which is good. You still got to pay it off, but he has all the debt in the world as well. And the purpose of life and using wealth is to grow in peace and generosity and to be a blessing to others. And that's why I invite you to really pray with in that. And there's another book called True Riches as well. I forget the author. That's a good book on how to see your wealth in a Christian light.
Wow, great resources, Will. And after this show, we'll get links to them for folks in the show notes of this episode, if you'd like, so that they can find that, and certainly to contact you to get it to find those as well. But I really appreciate all of your wonderful advice, not financial advice, but all your wisdom, let's say. But it was great to have you on the show, and like you said, great to get to know you over these past few months, and look forward to. I hope. Great things come. Good luck with your business. We'll keep you in our prayers. I know that in my own world, what you said about prayer and fundraising is always true. Many times I will say a little prayer before a meeting with a donor or prospective donor, or if I'm going into a difficult meeting, I always find that prayer helps to center me, put me in touch with my God. And I've never had a bad outcome come after I've said that kind of a prayer to God, asking for his blessing on a challenging situation. So again, thanks, Will. Again, we'll leave links to Will in the show notes of this episode. And thanks again for joining us on Advancing Our Church. God bless.
Of course. Thanks again. God bless.
Well, that's our show this week. I want to thank you, our listeners, for joining me on today's show. I hope you found this conversation valuable and that it has in some way inspired you to take action to advance the mission of our church. And if this is your first time listening to Advancing Our Church, I hope you're going to stick around and subscribe. You can find us on all places where you download your favorite podcasts. You can find us on YouTube. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And for more information about our show, please visit us at advancingourchurch.com. And once again, many thanks to our sponsor, Changing Our World. You can find a link to their website in the show notes of this episode. Well, that's it for me, everybody. I hope you're having a terrific week. We'll see you next time. Take care, and God bless.